Hello, welcome. All right, so let me get your names. So today we're going to do the Spanish. All right, and I have a section on your next assignment on the Black Legend, and we talk about how the the Spanish and the Native Americans are, I don't know about absolutely equivalently, but the Spanish and the Native Americans are both a source of the heritage of Latinos, of Mexican Americans. All right. So I want to get that up just in case, because I had to open it up. I'm going to close it and I'm going to open it again. All right. So hopefully you could all see that. All right. I hope so. All right. And so all I try to do on number one, right, is people contend, they use acronyms in conflict history like WASP, White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And that does make some sense with England. Although England did have several groups of nationalities and ethnicities come and migrate, as well as conquer and occupy England. And we'll get into that soon. But with the Spanish, oh my goodness, what a multi-ethnic background they have. And remember that for a while, they tried to use a policy of cleanness of blood, limpieza de sangre. And they wanted only the pure Spanish Iberians to come and colonize the Americas, to serve as the highest members of the bureaucracy. And they created what a guy in the 1970s would call a pigmentocracy, kind of a hierarchy, somewhat based upon the pigment of your skin. And there is some vestiges of that to this day. The two countries that are kind of notorious for having vestiges of that pigmentocracy tend to be Argentina first and Costa Rica second. I remember myself spending a summer term in Costa Rica, and it was very typical to see things like fuera nicas on the walls, like get out Nicaraguans. And a lot of the Nicaraguans were criadas. They were like domestic workers and in the low-paying menial jobs. And they were much darker skinned than the Costa Ricans, who call themselves ticos and ticas. And they were light-skinned enough that they actually confused me several times as a tico. And so they're proud of that. They're proud of their Spanish heritage, that they didn't, engage in mestizaje. Mestizaje is a mixture, literally. So in this case, we're talking about miscegenation, like interethnic sex and procreation and marriage. And so you have some vestige of that. You see sometimes in the telenovelas, the abogados, the lawyers, and the people that are like high ranking and wearing a suit, oftentimes are lighter skin, lighter eyed, lighter hair color. So you see vestiges of that from the Spaniards. But when you look at their past, right? Oh my goodness, very, very multi-ethnic. All right. So just to give a few examples, the natives by the Greeks were called Iberians, and the name is kind of stuck. So the native Iberians, they think probably engaged in the Neolithic or the farming revolution, but if they didn't, they were abetted by the Celtic people. So the Celtic people came in, and of course they're much lighter skinned, lighter eyed, and so forth, coming from Central and Northern Europe. And when the Celtic people came in, they engaged in miscegenation for centuries and centuries. And so much so that the population, much of the population, was known to outsiders as Celtiberians. It's like half Celtic and half Iberian. And so that happened to a large degree. And then you had the Greeks down in Emporias, like where they get the term emporium, right? Like an open market. And the Greeks were on the Mediterranean coast, and they founded several cities, several markets, and yeah, so you have that there. And then, of course, the Greeks were not homogenous themselves. To this day, there's somewhat of a large difference between southern and northern Greeks and Greeks in the islands of the Mediterranean, Sicilians, etc. Okay, so you had a myriad of different Greeks coming in. I think you not only had the ancient Minoans, but after them, right, the Mycenaeans, and the Mycenaeans were like in the movie Troy, the alleged Greeks that attacked Troy. They have their famous iron gates and so forth throughout Spain that have still stood the test of time. And then in addition to that, you had the Phoenicians, and the Phoenicians, right, were in modern day Lebanon in the Near East, and they brought them the alphabet. They helped cement a coin-based economy, and like I said, they mainly it was peaceful as merchants and as migrants. The Phoenicians came into Iberia, and then of course you have the Romans, and that's where you get the term Hispanic, right? The Romans took over in like 250 BC, took over Hispania or Iberia, and they named it Hispania. Hither and thither is the translations for the two Latin terms. I can't remember how they were pronounced in Latin, but the closer and the further Hispania, split in half, east and west. And they mined tin and gold and other things of Iberia. They colonized with veterans colonies of their soldiers, and they intermarried with the Iberian people, and it was up to the fathers if they wanted to recognize the sons of those biracial unions, and they could send them to school, and they could even get them involved in politics. So they got involved to such an extent that there ended up being a Spaniard emperor of Rome, and that was Theodosius. So at any rate, the Romans, and they brought their aqueducts and their architecture, their public baths and amphitheaters and all that stuff, and their schools. They brought all that there. And then with the fall of Rome, you had the Western or the Visigoths who came. And when the Visigoths came, they were Germanic. Mainly the Goths and the other Germanic tribes were from modern day Germany and Denmark and Schleswig and Holstein. And so at any rate, they came into all throughout Europe. And but the Western Goths, the Visigoths, they were known for being it's kind of anomalous. It doesn't happen that often. Even though they defeated the Romans, there weren't that many to defeat, by the way, because they made and by the way, the Romans called England not only Hispania, hither and thither, but another name for it also was Britannia. So both Hispanic, I'm sorry, Britannia goes to England. I'm sorry. They named England and Britannia. I'm getting the two mixed up because I'm writing an assignment on the English right now. I'm sorry. But at any rate, they fled from England. But they were in larger numbers in Spain, put up a decent fight, but the Visigoths won. But the winners actually assimilated to the losers, and that doesn't happen very often in history. So they took the Lex Hortensia, the Roman constitution, and they emulated it in the Germanic language and adopted it to some of their Germanic customs. All right. And so so with the Visigoths, like I said, they kept things highly Roman. They became Catholic Christians. Very early on, they put their religious leaders in Toledo, so like the term Holy Toledo. That was like their Canterbury to England or Rome to Italy. And so at any rate, yeah, you had the Visigoths until 711. And then in 711, they were kind of falling apart on their own. There were a lot of coups and civil wars amongst the Visigoths. And not only that, even though there was one primary king, they often had many kingdoms that owed fealty to the main king, and it was decentralized on purpose under the Germanic traditions. And so they weren't united well. And in 711, the Moors came and invaded Spain. But let me go backwards a minute. I forgot one other group. Is the second Carthaginian War between Rome and Carthage was begun over Spain, over Hispania. And so the Carthaginians, right, They were a mixture of the ancient Berber people, very mysterious people, Berber. They're not connected to the Bantu-speaking Black Africans beneath the Sahara Desert, but they're not Arabic yet either. And so it's a very interesting, kind of mysterious um, demographic or ethnicity of people. But you had these ancient Berbers, and then they intermarried with Phoenicians. Phoenicians came and settled in large numbers in North Africa, and they established together Carthage. And so the Carthaginians, right, were kind of Middle Eastern and also North African, and they began to be called the Moors. Okay, as not only that mixture, but also being by this time Muslim. So the Moors of North Africa invaded across the Strait of Gibraltar, Spain, and they took about 2/3 of Spain within the first 20 years. All right. And then Spain was highly decentralized into these different districts. And there was always one to like five Spanish regions that would be putting up a fight against the Moors, and then others who would cut their deals with them and swear fealty to them and just kind of acquiesce to the inevitable, especially down in the south of Spain. And so the Muslim Moors called it Al-Andalus, and that's why you get the bottom region of Spain called Andalusia to this day from the Arabic word. So at any rate, you have Arabic, Moorish, Muslim Spain for quite some time, Al-Andalus. And then not only that, when they had some rebellions in some of the Spanish regions, they brought over Arabic cavalry and Arabic soldiers. So now you have Arabs coming in and living in Spain and intermarrying with the Spaniards, etc. So that's just one more ethnicity into the melting pot. And so they're going to lose, of course, the two Carthaginian wars, the Punic Wars against Rome. And so now in 711, the Moors come in, and like I said, they ruled. By 1492, they had just a small remnant left, and what was left of what they called their caliph, because at first he was just called Abasha, a governor, because he was part of the Umayyad Caliphate back in Damascus or Lebanon, back in the Near East. But they broke away eventually and claimed their own caliphate in Spain. And so the caliph in Cordoba, you had different times where sometimes the caliph was pretty aggressive and oppressive to the native Iberian people, to the Spaniards. And then sometimes you had enlightened Muslim rulers like Ibn al-Ramad III. Ibn al-Ramad III had a renaissance in Cordoba, and he brought in artists and musicians and inventors and intellectuals and writers, etc. And he didn't care if they were Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, or anything else for that matter. It was by merit, and it was quite an enlightened time in Cordoba. But like I said, so it went back and forth. But at one time or another, there's usually at least one Spanish realm that was fighting for its independence from them, and they called it the Reconquista, the reconquering of Spain for the Spanish Catholics and to get the Muslim leaders out. So at any rate, they finished that in 1492 by kicking out the Caliph from Cordoba, the same year that they discovered the Caribbean. All right. So then in addition to that, let's see here where we are. We have Rome, and we already had the Visigoths, the Umayyad Caliphate. So to state that all European colonizers of the Americas were white-skinned, Germanic, racist bullies socialized into a European medieval outlook and institutions controlled by their own military and clergy ignores all these unique nuances to Spain's historical developments. England was not as thoroughly colonized by Rome as was Spain, nor its predominantly Celtic people nearly as integrated into the Roman governments. Let's see here, as were Spaniards. Cities, citadels, trade goods, technology, etc., bearing the stamp of Greeks, Phoenicians, North Africans, Romans, tend to be scarce in English soil. The Angles and Saxons who took England over when Rome imploded did not have kings like the Visigoths in Spain, who assimilated more to things Roman than adhering to their own Germanic ways. No Muslim, North African, or Arabic invasion and colonization of England ever took place, as happened in medieval Spain. For this reason, historians William and Carla Phillips can boast that Iberia has always been multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multicultural. And that's pretty much my thesis. All right. All right. Well, number two, pretty simple. Two ironies about the Spanish, and one of them I've somewhat covered. Is the first irony, right? Is remember we went over the five or so criteria that the Europeans used as a measuring stick, as a barometer to decide how civilized the Native Americans were. So remember the first one we talked about was manipulation of the environment. They want to see them go from small bands of hunter-gatherers to congregate large numbers in villages and cities and have farming feed the people. So engage in the Neolithic or New Stone Tool or farming revolution. And then you also look at the from there, right? It's supposed to domino. We talked about that, right? How remember you need to coerce the people to do the labor. So you need an autocratic ruler. Then he needs help from some type of aristocracy. You need to worry about at harvest time someone coming and taking your food. So you need a military. All the vagaries of weather and rain and soil. You want to get some type of a religious hierarchy to come in as like shaman, the middleman between humanity and the gods and the spirits, and try to get them to cooperate for good farming. And then, of course, you develop more of a desire for like aesthetics. Aesthetics is the human pursuit of beauty. So you want to write literature. You want to engage in sculpture and art. You want to have nice textiles or clothing and jewelry and so forth. And in doing that, right, you're gonna establish an intelligentsia of educated people. You're going to establish artisans who are skilled workers, and you're going to establish merchants who do the trading. So then it kind of dominoes, right, into a quote complex society. All right, and then of course you want to engage in technological development and also religion. And remember, the natives had no chance with religion; they had no idea about Christianity. But at any rate, going back to the Spanish, you could make the argument that virtually most, at least most, of the I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. I forgot where I was going. Oh, most of the accoutrements of civilization that the Spanish boasted about having over the Native Americans when they came and quote discovered the Americas, they had not come up with on their own. I find that ironic. So some people are still contending that it was the Celtic people who brought the new stone tool or farming revolution to the native Iberians. Of course, Rome brought all kinds of accoutrements of civilization, right? So a myriad of classes, cities in which a great commercial economy grew. The list goes on with the Romans. The Phoenicians brought an alphabet to them. And so a versatile syllabic written language. They also had the, let's see here. See here, between 700 and 550 BC, writing, at first Semitic and Egyptian, then Greek, ironworking, large-scale silver mining, wheel-made pottery, extravagant clothing, sophisticated weapons, and jewelry were introduced to Spain by way of the Phoenicians and later the Carthaginians. Okay. The Romans gave them government, the Lex Hortensia, their constitution. Okay. The layout of a pueblo, of a city, the Romans gave them that. Arts and letters and schools. And then, as I mentioned with Ibn al-Ramad III, you have a Renaissance. So mathematics and poetry and philosophy and all these different, engagements in the arts and sciences happened under Muslim rule at Cordoba. And then not to mention, The Muslim Moors are the ones who brought from Asia gunpowder and the crossbow, which were of inestimable worth to the Spaniards militarily against strong tribes like the Aztec. Now it leads to the second irony, okay? So that which the Spanish boasted of as evidence of being more civilized than the natives, they had not come up with themselves. They piggybacked off of conquerors and migrants back in Spain. Then the second irony is that they oftentimes copied, even though it was centuries later, they copied practices by colonizers of their native Spain centuries before. They utilized a lot of the same tactics when they colonized the Americas. So just as they've been oppressed and exploited and abused in the past, they did so in the same manner to the Native Americans centuries later. And I find that to be a second irony. Okay. So for instance, the Romans, when they came in and they conquered, they were entitled to veteran colonies and lands and entitled to the forced labor as kind of like vassals of the Iberians that they conquered. And it was known as the latifundia. Well, the Spanish did the same thing, right? Just with a different name. It was called encomienda. So the encomienda was like a more modern version of the Roman latifundia. The Romans also called forth for public works and had royal officials to come to the local areas and demand a certain number of the subjugated people to come and build a road, a canal, a building, a bridge, etc. The Spaniards did the same thing centuries later, and it was known as the repartimiento system, as you see it right there in the middle, the bottom line above the pictures. So the repartimiento, there was equivalent of that the Romans instituted over Spanish. Then there were oftentimes few windows of socioeconomic mobility when they were subjugated by the Romans and, of course, by the Moors. But two areas in which they always had a chance, and that was through the military upon fighting well, and that was through the church upon developing a reputation for piety and all that, being a good Catholic. And so likewise, the same thing with the Native Americans. The Native Americans could not be an alcalde mayor, could not be a mayor, much less a governor, much less a viceroy, much less a judge in the audiencia. There's no way. But what could they do is they could go fight in the military and fight up the ranks, or they could join the priesthood and join up the ranks of the priesthood. So the same two avenues that were pretty much the only ones available to the Spaniards under Rome, they gave those same two avenues to the Native Americans when centuries later they colonized them. So the way they've been treated as a colonized people, they treated others as the colonizer centuries later. And I will say there is one exception to this, okay? And that is that with the Spanish, there are a couple things actually that you could say a little bit in their defense. Is for one, they had a system of accountability of their rulers. Okay, they may have gotten this from the Holy Roman Empire, which they joke was not holy, was not Roman, and wasn't much of an empire. But at any rate, like Charlemagne, Charlemagne did this as well. Is you bring in a royal official unannounced, right, or two of them. You put the Spanish leader under house arrest in his local environs, and you give everybody a chance in the nearby neighborhood and area to file any complaints of misrule against him. And then it goes to the members of the audiencia, the judges. They decide on his innocence or guilt. And if they believe he had misused his power, he was fired and sometimes even put in chains and sent back to Spain. And that was known as the juicio de residencia. And the judge was known as the juez de residencia, right, where they put you under house arrest. So at any rate, you had that system of accountability. And then also there were gracias al sacar notes, okay? And the gracias al sacar notes, I'll write it down right here. All right. So these two right here, the gracias al sacar notes are when you did some type of meritorious act that was worthy of being rewarded and praised. And they would give you, as like a Native American or a mestizo who was half Native American and half Spanish, they would give you a certificate contending that you are to be treated as if you are a white-skinned Spaniard. I kid you not. So let's say you saved a Spaniard's son from drowning in a river. That might be an example of such, right? You could earn a gracias al sacar note and be treated legally as a Spaniard, no matter what you really are and no matter what you really look like. All right, so those are the two ironies that I write about on number 2. Okay, any questions so far? Right. Okay, there's one, it's going to be a little bit redundant. There's one on the Black Legend that's very, very similar to this. It's the same premise, but it's just a little bit broader than this one. But the term is historicism. Historicism implies, okay, that you are a product of your historical circumstances. That whatever the culture is, whatever the leading institutions like family and church and government and schools are like, that those things are going to mold you, right? So hence you're largely a product of nurture in the whole debate of nature versus nurture. To what extent are you born with a DNA that dictates how you are? And to what extent is it your environment and how you're brought up? This one is the latter, okay? It focuses on the environment of the Spaniards and how it molded them, all right? So what I try to do, and it was kind of tough, is go century by century and give instances of one Spanish leader in one Spanish region after another who raised arms in, quote, just or holy war against the Muslim caliph, or before that, he was known as the Basha. Okay. I also chose deliberately some of the caliphs or bashas who were the most kind of oppressive and confrontational and punitive toward the Spaniards. So I'm deliberately manipulating the data. Okay. Then also symbolic things, right? Is, for instance, at Santiago de Compostela, they found allegedly the bones of the Apostle James. And it became a pilgrimage site for the Spaniards. And then it morphed into him being the patron saint of holy war against the Moors, the Muslim Moors. That St. James was fighting on their behalf. You literally had some battles in which the Spaniards claimed they saw his apparition riding on a horse with his sword unsheathed against the Muslims, etc. So what they would do, right, is they would get the cavalry and they'd ride in on their horses. They'd unsheath their swords or their javelins, and then they would say, Santiago con nosotros, right? St. James with us, when they'd go to fight. Well, they not only did that against the Moors, but they did the same thing against the Aztec and the other Native American tribes here in the Americas. St. James with us. Let's fight the holy war against these heathen. Okay. Then in addition to that, so I'm trying to make a picture of how there was constant war for the reconquest of Spain in one region or another amongst one petty Spanish king against a tyrannical Muslim caliph. Okay. And like I said, I'm deliberately manipulating the data, finding the instances of conflict. Okay. And then in addition to that, you have several popes. Look at this. Popes like Urban II, Innocent III, and Eugenius IV. They all gave their blessings to the Spaniards to fight in a just and holy war, offering them indulgences out of purgatory for their sins connected to the sacrament of penance. So as a reward, if they should fight against the Moors. So now it's getting sanctioned by one, two, three, at least three popes. Okay. And so then, you have the, and I think I have it on the one that's coming up on the next assignment. But the Apostle Paul, he writes on two occasions in the New Testament of the Bible. He writes that these Greek and Roman gods are not just harmless fake gods to him and some of the Christian leaders. He goes so far as to believe that they were demons in the guise of a fake god to try to lull people away from serving the real God, right, etc. So hence, right, some of these, oftentimes, it's bad enough that they have a sense of intolerance toward non-Christians, and they feel entitled to be able to fight and kill them. But they will go so far as, from like the writings of Paul and others from the Bible, that these people are unknowingly serving the devil, right? They're like children of the devil, serving demon gods, etc. So they totally dehumanize and demonize their opposition, and that's the world they lived in as early modern European Catholics. Okay. So then also, the majority of conquerors, okay, they're going to get like a blank check from Isabella and Ferdinand, and then after that, it's going to kind of change. Although under Charles V, the next guy, it remains for a little bit longer. But under these two initial monarchs of Aragon and Castile, Spain, they offer a blank check to the Spaniards. They say, if you're willing to go and risk your own life, risk your own money to try to sail across the Atlantic and conquer infidels, or find new territory that's uninhabited, we will ennoble you. You could become hidalgos. And hidalgo was like the lowest level of ennoblement. And it was earned through military talent. So they could become hidalgos. They could be granted the status, if it was empty land, of an adelantado, someone who goes adelante, goes forward and claims vacant land, tierra vacía, empty land. And adelantado was like a governor of that open area. Now, if it was a highly populated area, they were granted other political offices. I can't remember what they were, but they were also granted encomiendas, the forced labor of the natives that they vanquished, and other types of rewards. So at any rate, what do you know? By far, the majority of self-styled conquerors or conquistadores who took this offer up, right, were second, third, and fourth sons of hidalgos in the southeast section of Extremadura. Okay, and to a lot of people that makes perfect sense, because that's where the reconquest against the Muslims, like in Cordoba, that's where it ended. That's where the last fighting took place. Okay, so chances are these sons saw their dad, witnessed their dad with pride fight and succeed against the Moors, be enriched as a nobleman, as an hidalgo, and before they were just a peasant, they're ennobled as an hidalgo. They give themselves and their sons a much better life, therefore, from that reward. But then the oldest son gets all of it when the dad dies. It's called the mayorazgo, el hijo mayor, the oldest son gets everything. So these second and third sons, right, they see their dad do it, and they see him get rewarded. They get a taste of the better life, but older brother gets it all. So they're like, I'm going to go do it like dad did it. And they went across the ocean, and they used a lot of the same military terms, religious terms, when they fought the, quote, pagan Native Americans. So what I'm saying here, right, is it's kind of part of the Black legend, is that the Spaniards, they took that holy war, intolerant, hostile, militant ethos, that way of looking at things and ethical behavior, and that they imbibed, that they took in during the Reconquest fight against the Moors back in Spain, and they carried that mindset and that ethos across the Atlantic in fighting the Native Americans. Okay, they were products of their environment, products of their upbringing. Now, remember, one problem with that, okay, is like I said, you have cases in which there were Catholics siding with Muslim Moors against other Catholics in a nearby region. You had Muslims siding with Catholic Christians against other Muslim rivals. You had periods of, they called it convivencia, coexistence, living with each other, right? And there were times of great peaceful convivencia, coexistence. So to say that they had this 700-year reconquest fight from 711 AD to 1492 is a little bit simplistic. Okay, they weren't always fighting like that. Anyway, those are the main rivers in Spain. And if you wanted to look at some of the heroes they made, right? These are kind of cases in point. Is El Cid, right? They've done a lot of books and movies on El Cid and Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. And I don't know much about the former, but I've read some on El Cid. And according to my sources, he was not as, his life was romanticized. It was very much romanticized. He had instances in which he cooperated and coexisted with Muslim leaders and fought other Catholic Spaniards. But just at a key time, he was in, I want to say it was Valencia, and the Muslim authorities got kind of stubborn and kind of put his proverbial back against the wall, and he took his stand against them at Valencia, and he won. And so he became this symbol of the Reconquest, right? Of the brave, fearless Spaniard Catholic fighting against the Moors. Right. And then I show some evidence of intolerance once they were here. The requirement, they would read the Nicene Creed from the Catholic Church that they had come up with way back in the 300s when they were putting the canon or the Bible together and rejecting some books and accepting others as scripture. And they would read that Nicene Creed and tell the natives they have 24 hours to adhere to those beliefs and accept the true faith, or they would declare holy war on them. All right, so that was a pretty ruthless way of doing it, because the papal bulls under Alexander VI, they did not specify how to do it. They said, Spaniards and Portuguese, you could have the Americas as long as they're pagan, and as long as once you conquer them, you convert them. But he didn't say how and what methods. So sometimes the conquistadors especially try to do so in a ruthless way. But that didn't last. Spain tried to put an end to that, especially first Charles V and then Philip II. All right, so that is it. That should take us into next week. And then next week, we got a pretty long one. If you thought this one was long, this was nothing. Next week, we're doing the Black Legend. And remember what that is that the Spanish serve as a perfect anti-model, supposedly, for today. That as they were intolerant, we preach tolerance. As they were physically brutal, we teach pacifism, or at least, nonviolence. As they were ethnocentric, we teach being open-minded and kind of a cosmopolitan, being a citizen of the whole world. And as they were exploitative, we teach equity, fairness for the poor. And as they were inequitable and hierarchical in their society, we teach egalitarianism. Everyone should be on equal footing. So the Spaniards, when they saw this depiction of them as being awful, the epitome of what not to be as a colonizer, they defensively said, this is a black legend. This is a dark lie about us. And the name has stuck. So that's what the black legend is. It deals with the unique accusation that the Spanish serve as a good anti-model today for how awful of a colonizer they were. Okay? So we'll get into that next Tuesday. Anybody have any questions, any comments before we leave? Can I get a thumbs up? Were you able to hear me the whole time? You guys still there? Can you hear me? Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you. Right on. Angel, thank you. All right, so I hope I was of, thank you, Dominic. I hope I was of some help. Like I said, I love this stuff. I think Spain is just fascinating. It has such a multi-ethnic, dramatic past. It's just kind of crazy. But anyway, yeah. So like I said, that last one, it operates under the assumption that they were products of their environment. That's all they knew. And they carried that ethos over across the ocean. And you're going to see, like I said, I'm a little disappointed in myself. It's almost a carbon copy thesis on the next assignment on the Spanish didn't know any better in being religiously intolerant. Okay. So you guys have a good day. Dominic, you drive safe.
I know you already, sir. Thank you. I know you already spoke, or I know you already wrote about what you expected on assignment 2. Can you give a brief brief explanation?
Sure. So like I said, you just you're citing what the main point is, right? In just a sentence or two. I would like to see about two examples of supporting data that I tried to use to support that thesis. And really, that's it. It doesn't have to be that long at all. And then give me your evaluation. What shortcomings do you see in it? Was it too narrow? Is there something in your mind, a topic or a way of looking at it that was never, that was never thought of it when I wrote it? Because like, again, I'm deliberately being very one-sided in each of them. So anything you see wrong with it on the evaluation part, I don't take it personally at all. I like to see what you have to say. A lot of times people say very intelligent points that I like to read. And so, yeah, and it really is that simple. So if you're very accurate and you're intelligent on why you did or did not believe it to be credible, it could just be like barely, not even quite half a page, and that's still okay. Does that help, Dominic?
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, I just want to see that you captured the main idea. You captured an example or two of how I try to defend it. And then I'm always curious about what you think of it. Because like I said, I'm deliberately being one-sided. I don't want you to take these at face value. The only thing that you could count on is I feel confident in the facts that I employ, that the facts are true. But of course, I am deliberately picking and omitting facts, right, as they are convenient to my opinion. Okay? So I hope you guys are doing okay in your lives, in your classes, everything. I wish you well. Be careful in everything that you do. And next Tuesday, we'll jump into the Black Legend. I think it's fun. It's a lot of contested, dramatic data, especially wait till you read the very first one by Las Casas. He's a Spaniard, a Spanish priest, who writes how awful the Spanish treated the Native Americans. And he had death threats all throughout Spain. He was afraid to go back to Spain. And he kind of inadvertently begins the Black Legend as a Spaniard himself. All right. All right. So you guys take care, okay? If there aren't any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and let you go if that's okay. Okay. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Angel, Jessica. Thanks a lot. No problem. Thank you, Jessica. Bye-bye.